This is Mungo Darkmatter, and welcome to Dark Matters. Today on Dark Matters, we're going to discuss when to buy Windows 8. Whenever Microsoft comes out with a new version of Windows, it's typically the policy of IT departments to wait about a year or until the first service pack is released. The reason for this is, even though Microsoft goes to a lot of trouble beta testing their operating system, and they try to get as many people as possible in as many different environments with as much different type of hardware as they can, it's not until it's released to the general public that there's a broader base of different models of PCs, different environments, home and work, and different networks. So once it's released, they're going to find a lot more problems, particularly in the first couple of months. Also, manufacturers who manufacture software and hardware for Microsoft Windows, even though they may have already worked on drivers and fixes for their software by using pre-release versions of Windows 8, a lot of times there are still other bugs for them to work out. For example, when Windows 8 is released, there are changes. If you've used a pre-released version of it, or if you've been developing with a pre-released version of it, things could change, and so when the final release is out, more fixes may need to be made. In fact, some companies seem to lag a little bit behind Microsoft when they release something, because I think a lot of times they figure, you know what, we're going to wait until the actual release and see what happens, and then we'll release our drivers or our new versions. So even some software companies and hardware companies may wait a little bit, so you may notice a little bit of a lag before they release new software or patches or whatever, even though they try to get it out as fast as possible in most cases. So that's another reason to wait. Now, a lot of you may be thinking, well, what about Windows Vista? That was a disaster. What happened with Windows Vista was Microsoft has been improving Windows since they put it out, basically. And back before XP, they actually had two separate operating systems that they called Windows. The interfaces looked alike because they evolved them to merge interfaces so they would be alike. But one was mainly corporate operating system, and the other was a home operating system. And corporate actually has some extra features, and you wouldn't necessarily need those at home, so they kind of figured they had two markets. But on the other hand, they wanted the interface of both versions to look very much alike, because that way you'd go to work and you'd work on your Windows machine, you'd go home, you'd work on your Windows machine, and so you wouldn't have problems adapting between the two. So there's an advantage to having the same interface at home and at work. So what happened was they wanted to merge it so that the core operating system, which is kind of the underlying stuff that runs the operating system, were the same on both. So they only had one operating system. They only have one set of drivers, basically, or for the operating system, or they'd have less sets of drivers. And it would be more coherent between the two. So what they did was, starting with XP, they had home versions and professional versions. So they still do this with versions of Windows. So they'll have a home version, they'll have a professional, they'll have a premium. And they have some extra features in the more expensive versions, and the more expensive versions are designed to work on corporate LANs instead of home networks, and so on. Initially, before XP came out, Windows 2000 was supposed to be the operating system where they were going to merge the home and the professional into one operating system underneath with the same interface but different versions of the operating system which had more features. What happened is they weren't ready in time, so they released Windows 2000 Professional for the corporate world, and people at home were still left with Windows 98, unless they were using Windows 2000 at home, which some people were doing anyway. So they came out with a version they called Me, or Millennium. And Millennium was supposed to be kind of an improved version of Windows 98 in kind of a stopgap until they finished XP, which took them a couple more years. The problem with Windows Me, though, was that they changed enough of it so a lot of applications, particularly some internet applications, just didn't work right with it. And there were a lot of problems with getting drivers to work with it. And manufacturers said, well, you know, if you're not going to continue this version, I'm not going to make a special driver just to work with Me. So a lot of companies did not support Me, so Me kind of went extinct, so to speak. When Windows Vista came along, they said, you know what, we know a lot more about operating systems now, and we can build a better operating system. So let's build a new version of Windows from the ground up so that we can fix some security problems that would be harder to patch, and we can fix some other problems. So they started from the ground up to make a better operating system. And it took them longer than normal to release Windows Vista because it was a new operating system. It wasn't just an improvement over the old operating system. So what happened is people got Vista and they were having problems with drivers, and it didn't work quite right with some software. There were all sorts of annoyances about it that people didn't like. And so it got a really, really bad rap initially. And even though they worked and they fixed a lot of the problems with various patches and stuff, it still had kind of a bad name to it. So when Windows 7 came out, Windows 7 is basically a patched version of Vista with a few new features and stuff. But Windows 7 works great. So Windows 7 is like when you start a new model of car, the first year model might not be as good, or the first year or two might not be as good because they have problems in it still, and they work the problems out in engineering as the model line continues. So by the second or third year, the car may be a lot better than it was the first year. So it's a similar type of problem. Basically, Vista was a new model of operating system. So 7 works really, really well. I would not anticipate the same level of problems with Windows 8 when it's released on October 26th to the public as there was with Vista, because really it's just an improvement on 7, at least underneath. There are a lot of improvements, but it's the same operating system as Vista and 7. It's a progression of it. There are some differences on the interface, so that you've got to be aware of that. And every time they put out a new version, they're going to tweak the interface at least a little bit so that people think, oh, well, this looks like a new operating system. I've got something new here. So there are going to be kind of minor tweaks that you might notice. But there's some major tweaks too, because Start Menu, they removed that and they replaced it with a Start Screen. And part of the reason they did that was the Start Screen will work with touchscreen computers or with laptops or with desktops. So that's something that you'll have to get used to when you purchase Windows 8. So that's something to consider. The interface is parts of the interface are very different. The desktop looks very similar to the older desktop, but there's still some minor differences that they've made in that as well. But they have an interface built into Windows 8 now called Metro, which is designed for tablet PCs or with them in mind, and the start program is part of that. And instead of having a start menu, they have a start page, and that's part of that, so that it can work on other devices using touch screens and such. So those are all things to consider. You'll have to deal with a newer interface. You may have problems with certain hardware or software, particularly if you use an unusual piece of software or hardware. You know, I wouldn't anticipate a lot of problems with Microsoft Word, for instance, but if you're using specialized software, there may be problems with that. So it will take time to work out. So if you have a machine right now and it works okay, I would wait and see what Windows 8 is like, see what other people's experiences are with it, and take a wait and see approach, or maybe wait a year. If your machine's okay and everything, you can do that. There's probably no reason for you to upgrade to the new operating system on your machine. You'll probably just want to wait until you get your next machine. If your machine is kind of wearing out and you need a new machine fast, you have like until October 26th to get a Windows 7 machine. What you should look for, though, is a lot of times when the new operating system comes out, they'll give you a coupon to get a free upgrade to the next operating system, because you know you're close to when they're going to release it. So in order to keep computer sales up, they'll say, oh, we'll give you this coupon when this comes out after the 26th. You can mail it in and we'll send you one, or a new copy of the operating system, and you can update your machine. That's a pretty good deal. Now when Vista came out, I got a machine like that, and I sent for the version of Vista, the new version of Vista, and they sent that to me. And I never bothered to upgrade the machine, because with Vista, because of the problems, a lot of people stuck with XP. Even a lot of corporations stuck with XP and waited until 7 came out. So I never installed that, because I had XP on, or I had Vista on other machines, and there was no advantage for me to switch over to it. And there was some software I was using at the time that I was concerned wouldn't work quite all right with Vista, and so I kept Windows XP. I also decided to keep that machine as XP because that way I would have an XP machine available to me to run certain things if I needed to, that would run on XP but not on Windows Vista. So if you're going to get a new machine, look for that particular deal if you're going to get it now. Otherwise, if you can wait a while, I would advise waiting to see what the problems are, the initial problems are, at least in the first few months, and then maybe go to a computer store and take a look at the newer features on the Windows 8 interface to see if you like them. If you can work with a Windows 8 machine for a while before you do your purchase, then you'll have a better idea what Windows 8 is like. In the next few weeks, I'm going to be trying out Windows 8 myself. I usually don't try out beta versions anymore of operating systems, because in the past I used to do that, and they change them as they're writing them. Now, as it gets closer and closer to release, the beta versions are very close to what the release are going to be. But to me, sometimes I'll load a beta version if I have access to one to see what the operating system is going to be like. But to me, it's kind of a waste of time to look at that. Although it's valuable to have beta testers, they need beta testers, obviously, so that they work out problems with the software. But to me, it's a waste of time, because I might like a certain feature, maybe gone, and the newer operating system may not work quite the same as the beta releases. So I find that a little bit confusing. So instead of dealing with that, I usually wait until the actual release and then start looking at it when the release is out. Corporate and IT departments already have access to the final release, because they released it under their corporate licenses first. You can also download a preview window, a preview version of Windows 8 for the consumer, so you can look at it to get used to the interface and look at what the interface is like. But I don't really necessarily suggest doing that unless you have a spare machine you can load it on, because you don't want to load it on the machine you're actually working on, because it will replace the operating system. And so the only way to get your operating system back is to use the restore disks from your original system. So you may want to try the preview version. You could always load it into a virtual machine like VMware or Virtual PC, which is free from Microsoft. So you could do that as well, and try that out if you have a powerful enough machine to do that. And if you're, comfortable doing that or know how to do that, you can do that. Otherwise, I would just I would take a wait and see attitude before you go to Windows 8. Although I think you probably want to try to stay with the latest versions of Microsoft Windows as they're stable, because they support the latest versions better, and they're going to drop off the older versions before long. And so you do get some advantages from the newer versions, particularly performance-wise and underneath, where they have tweaked things and made them a little bit better. But anyway, don't be too much in a hurry to rush out and get that. I remember back when Windows 98 came out and Windows 95 even came out, a lot of people really rushed out and got it and loaded it on the machines. And actually, those two versions of the operating system at home, when you loaded it on, they actually had improvements on them that people were like waiting for, And that's not the case now. Now you have a little bit longer to wait and see. If you have a couple machines at home, or if you have another machine at home, you could always buy a new machine with Windows 8 and kind of see what it's like. It's another strategy you could use. But typically, I would wait at least a few months and see what's going on. Within the first few months, they'll probably find some major things. By the time the first service pack comes out, most things should be fixed as well. Also, you may want to check websites to any software that you use to see what they say about Windows 8 and what problems they're having with it. Because you don't want to lose access to a piece of software that you really need, that you use, that's a unique piece of software. So always remember that as well. So you may actually have to wait until a particular piece of software is updated before you upgrade to Windows 8. All right, I'm planning on looking at Windows 8 in the next few weeks or so, and trying out the operating system and see how the interface works, and see the newer aspects of the operating system, and figure out ways to make it look more maybe like Windows 7 if necessary, which usually Microsoft often will make ways to make their newer interface look a little more like the older interface. You could do that with XP, for instance. You could make it look like the Windows 2000 interface if you were used to that. So that's there are usually ways to tweak the operating system to make it more comfortable for you. So I'll be trying that out in the next few weeks, and I'll give you my opinion on that. But I just wanted to make a video to let you know some considerations about upgrading as you're thinking about doing that. I'm Mungo Darkmatter, and this has been Dark Matters. And whatever you do, enjoy technology.